So welcome to another episode of Lixor Facets of Design. This is a podcast brought to you by Lixor Global Design. Just to reiterate why we set this podcast up, it's again to bring incredibly interesting, inspiring individuals to share their journeys. And this inspiration will be helpful for people entering the creative field, but also I think it'll be very helpful for people looking to progress their career. So what we do is we bring a bunch of people from different disciplines, the creative disciplines, hence the name Facets of Design, together to discuss their journey and some of the experiences they've had along the way. I'm really excited today to introduce our guest because I've known this individual, this gentleman, for more than 30 years. His name is Sean Carney, and he's had an incredibly interesting career and worked for some of the biggest in-house design agencies in the world and formed those agencies. Everything from Electrolux, where we first met, to Hewlett-Packard, to Philips, where he had more than 700 designers in his team and generating new value in new ways. So I'm really excited to get into this and welcome our guest, Sean Carney. Sean, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here, Paul, and thanks for the intro there.
Well, it's great. It's great to see you. I mean, I realized I was thinking about this last night, but we've known each other for almost 30 years. I mean, Sean actually gave me my first job, which is interesting, and actually my third job. So we'll get into that a bit later. But first, Sean, if you could maybe give us a brief explanation of your history and your journey, and what you're doing today. Just a brief, and then we'll dive into that a bit deeper later.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, happy to be here. So Yorkshireman by birth, to an Irish mother. So that's proven to be very beneficial as I can now operate in Europe with my EU passport.
Brilliant.
Early on, I was very much into sketching, born on the Yorkshire moors. So very much loved to go out for long walks on the moors and sketch birds and wildlife and things like that. And didn't really appreciate there could be a career in that down the line. But then I discovered a local artist by the name of David Hockney and followed a little bit David Hockney's career and Barbara Hepworth, who are also from Yorkshire, and ended up at the Bradford College of Art. And Bradford College of Art was fantastic. I got to explore fine art, sculpture, painting, sketching, everything. But along that journey, I discovered industrial design. First of all, furniture design and then industrial design. And I hadn't really given it any thought up until that point. But that led me into a degree in industrial design engineering and then a master's degree in industrial design engineering. And that was really the start of the journey for me.
Wow. Okay. So I mean, obviously the education part's really exciting and interesting for the people who watch and listen to our podcast, because often I get this question, what got people interested in a creative, let's say, career? Because I guess, like me, at that stage, industrial design wasn't so well known. So moving from being, let's say, interesting in the arts and being great at drawing and being creative into industrial design, it was quite an interesting path, I think, back then.
Yeah, I mean, initially, my father was very much into, he was an industrial guy. He sold oil and in a petrochemical industry. But he'd asked me to do some signage for some petrol stations that he'd been working with. But he was also into motorbikes in a big way. And one of my earliest memories of like 15 years old, I wanted a motorbike. I was desperate for a motorbike.
Okay.
And he came home one day with a wooden box and said, "There you go." I was like, "Where's the bike?" And it was literally an old British Royal Enfield Bullet in pieces. And he said, "You can build it and then ride it." But I had to physically build it. Now, as I was building it, I was looking for references of what it should look like, how things went together. And this is pre-internet days, by the way. That's how old we are. So finding ways in which to put this bike back together. But as I was doing it, I was always thinking, well, what if I did this? What if I reshaped the petrol tank? What if I reprofiled the seat? And I discovered like customizing bikes and things like that. And that led me to an interest of, well, there's a job in that too, transportation design and things. So I kind of got interested in, or I thought I would end up going down that road into car design, transportation design. And it was only when I went to visit a furniture course at one of the universities that I discovered everything around us, literally everything around us, is designed by someone. Some of it better than others, some of it really badly as well. I mean, this is 30, 40 years ago in Britain, so we had a lot of bad design. But it sort of woke something up in me that, I'd love to know more about how these things are made and how I could improve them going forwards.
It's a revelation, isn't it, for a young creative, when you realize that in the built environment, every single touch point, really, unless you're outside in nature, has been created by somebody. And I think, back then, of course, that wasn't so well publicized. It was almost taken for granted. And probably things were more engineered than they were designed as well. So less consumer centric. I can remember using things now, and I love furniture. I mean, I think industrial designers often have a fascination with furniture, but I love furniture, and you can often see some of the more functional things. They weren't ergonomic. They weren't as practical compared to, furniture that's created today, which looks beautiful, but clearly has been designed for consumers and for use.
Well, even design education at the time, I deliberately said industrial design engineering in brackets, because that was the focus of both my first degree and my master's degree, was the engineering part of it as well, how things are made.
Yeah.
And we put a lot of effort into material science, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, production engineering. So we visited factories and saw how stuff was made. And in fact, one of my first jobs out of college was with Thorn EMI, which was an old British conglomerate that was in everything from Ferguson TVs to Bendix washing machines and all the rest of it. I was fortunate there that Kenneth Grange from Pentagram fame was the executive creative director. And we would have every month have to stand up and do a critique with Ken Grange. And you were trembling in your pants coming to this critique. You had to make sure all your renderings and your blueprints were all spot on. And it was all Magic Marker renderings with Letraset and everything on there. And they were all beautifully crafted and everything else. Now, we were operating out of a factory site in Birmingham at this point. And so naturally, we were heavily influenced by the production managers and the R&D managers as to what we were designing.
Yeah.
What Kenneth Grange brought in was more of a user-centric perspective. So how will the user interact with your product? How will the user benefit from your products? And these were early day discussions before human-centered design was even a twinkle in Stefano's eye, for instance, So the fact that Kenneth was starting that really sparked something in me to go deeper, to go further, understanding and respecting production and manufacturing constraints and processes, but at the same time, looking at what's going to make this a better product for the end user.
That's a nice lead on, actually, talking about first jobs, because I know it'd be nice to unpack this, but actually you gave me my first job. So I studied at Newcastle industrial design, and actually my final year project actually was a washing machine. So I remember having first contact with you to get some counsel from you about what I could do to make the product more relevant. And and so you actually gave me my first job and my third job. So
I still remember the final project with the water droplet motif on the side panels, which funnily that you ended up in a water-based organization. But
somehow I'm always linked to blue brands for some reason, and kind of water related.
I recently did a slide with all of my brands that I've worked for, and guess what? 90% of them are blue.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? It's bizarre how that works out.
I joined Thorn EMI, as I said. Electrolux acquired the major appliance division of Thorn EMI in the UK. I was asked with a couple of other people to set up a design studio for the first time in the UK, a proper one. In the process of doing that, we relocated the team up to the north of England, to County Durham. So we were just on the doorstep of Newcastle, and we were looking for design talent. Strangely, funnily, perversely, we ended up hiring about half of the year you graduated
Exactly, it was.
into Electrolux.
That was incredible, wasn't it?
It was a very good year. There were a lot of good graduates, but we took all of you guys in, which created some tensions at times as well, because this was like the finishing school for Northumbria University. No, we produced some good work. And we built that team, which boxed way above its weight in the global Electrolux design organization. So we were fortunate at the time to have some very forward-looking CEOs of the business in the UK who wanted to look beyond the current portfolio and do some positive provocations about where consumers were heading.
Yeah.
And so we got an amazing opportunity to design a project called GBJ 2000.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a blast from the past.
So we were asked to project ourselves, 10 years or more into the future at the time, to think about how consumers would be living their lives in the year 2000.
Yeah.
Scary now looking back, but start to think about that. How would they cook? How would they entertain? What would that look like? And then build personas around all of those people in the future. And we produced some fantastic concepts, some great conceptual thinking, built models, physical models, demoed and prototyped it all. Even took it down to the Hempel Hotel in London to demonstrate it, had a big PR day and went on TV and radio to promote it. So meanwhile, back in head office, they'd been trying to build a concept studio, a Future Lab, and it hadn't got anywhere near this traction.
Yeah.
And so on the back of that, they tried to get you guys to move to Sweden.
Yeah.
And
I remember that interview actually, going to Stockholm and being.
Do you remember the night before the interview?
Oh, of course I do. Who could forget the night before?
So I knew these guys were going for an interview with the vice president of design the next day, and I was going to lose my team. So I took them all out for a celebration drink with a lot of rusty nails that night. So when they all turned up at their interview the next morning, they were all sweating profusely and trembling.
It was a hazy interview. But we got the job. Actually, Phil and I, you're talking about Phil as well, there were two of us that were up for the positions, I guess, in the concept teams at the time. But and we didn't take the job in the end. We actually stayed back in Spennymoor because I think at that stage we were doing some incredible work. And I think sometimes in an organization, there's an opportunity as well when you're outside the limelight, perhaps, of the head office. And we were very fortunate. We had you, of course, had convinced the business to give us enough freedom to invest in this study. And I just remember GBJ 2000 being phenomenal because we really could look, like you say, really look at new aesthetics and different design directions, but coming back to how will and how do people cook today, but in a different context, how could they cook and interact with refrigeration and cuisine in the future? And I just remember at the time just being the most amazing project, and there being, very few things like that at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was some Ettore Sozzas and those guys down in Italy were doing a lot of exploratory work, but it wasn't relating back to how we live our lives and the homes we live in. It was more avant-garde exploratory design. And what we were doing was taking the essence of their thinking and applying it in the context of everyday life as well.
I mean, that probably, you could say, it was a long time ago, but that really had embedded design thinking into that whole process of that project.
Yeah,
and we
built personas.
And we had some ethnographic research, we had the personas delivered, we had good insight, and we had futurists. So we had all of that stuff that's very trendy now, actually, but back then it wasn't really heard of, bringing it together in that way.
That was one of the foundations of what I've practiced ever since was, whenever we were designing a new product at the time, we were very kind of human-centric in our approach. We'd go out and do contextual interviews. But what I was missing up to that point was the fact that by the time I've produced this product, made the tools, got it in production, got it out into the stores and people are buying it, their lives have moved on from when we did the research. So we need to be able to project and anticipate where people are heading. And now this was an extreme example because what we were doing was putting foresight together with insight to create something that's useful, tangible, and works in the context of what their future homes will be. Now, that was an extreme example, but that foresight-driven design is really something I've practiced together with empathic design ever since.
It's quite interesting because when I think of that first stint, and we did lots of stuff that went into ranges of cookers and ovens and practical stuff also, stuff we learned from that conceptual exercise, that also influenced what we did in the short term as well as the long term. But when I think about my second stint, so obviously I left Spennymoor and the studio, and I went to work for Philips in Holland. And then I remember you called me up one day and said, look, you're taking over the studio in Italy, and would I like to come? And we talk about career progression on this podcast and how you move through your careers. And for me, it was quite a big step up because it was moving from being an industrial designer to straight to a manager. So you had this interesting opportunity, which was for me to run and manage cooking, which was a big section of the Electrolux portfolio. Which little did I know, I came and started that thing, and within a month, you asked if I would just sit in for 2 weeks on Electrolux's biggest ever, I guess, project, which was the global design concept for Electrolux. For the Electrolux group, it probably was the single biggest design project that we've ever undertaken. And it was, I remember you put together a team from all over the world, from all studios. And like I say, I was meant to be on that project 2 or 3 weeks, but ended up actually, staying on that project for quite some time. And in the end, running the entire thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was on the success of GBJ 2000 and everything else we were achieving up in the north of England, I was asked to move to Italy and establish the first European design center for Electrolux, because up to that point, we'd had country-specific design centers. So what we did was, when I landed in Italy, it was 12 Italians, not really speaking English, me speaking no Italian. And then a couple of guys from Brazil were brought in at the same time. Lisandro and Alessandro, and they started with me, and we were the foreigners in this beautiful setting with the Dolomiti behind us and Venice on the other way. But we figured out a way, and by the time I left, we'd got more than 30 different nationalities in that office and a real cultural melting pot of different creative perspectives, which allowed us to, again, box above our weights and overachieve in terms of creativity and what we were doing. And you're right, at that point, the business context was that Electrolux had been on a massive spending spree and growing pattern, buying companies around the world. Yeah. And we had more than 200 brands we'd acquired. So we had to figure out a way of managing those brands without crippling the manufacturing supply base and logistics. Yeah. And so we had a system of design, a design system at the time, before anybody called them that. It was called the design families. But again, that was just a way of creating platforms we could then leverage at a local level to build these products in a consistent way and minimizing tooling. But the ambition was from corporate to build a more aspirational premium positioning for the Electrolux brand. And that was something they hadn't done. So it was, again, down to a bunch of foreigners sitting in Italy to redefine and redesign a Scandinavian brand. Yeah. And that involved then going deep on what is Scandinavian design? What are the principles of Swedish design? And then where are Nordic design elements coming into that, and building that whole platform in which we could drive the brand transformation going forwards.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal project. I think, still to this day, I think I take learnings from that project. It was the most stressful time of my life, to be honest. It's the biggest project. It was across every platform that we had and every product typology. And like you said, it was a psychology behind, how do you maintain the Swedish heritage and the brand positioning, but at the same time, a complete new graphic, UX, UI, everything about every single thing from zero.
And then contextualizing it so it would still be relevant to consumers. An extreme example, Brazil. Yeah. So taking the new design of the fabulous new front-loading washing machine you designed for the European market, and then looking at how you were going to translate that as an archetype into the Brazilian top-loading washing machine structures.
Yeah, so, talking of Brazilians, we have one of our up there design leader for Europe, Patrick Spack. He was part of that project as well. He's still he came to Grower when I came to Grower as well, and still works here now. So we often talk and reminisce about that global design project and that time. So just one thing I just want to mention, I should have mentioned earlier, as always, we're filming this live, so there will be noises in the background. That's part of the authenticity of the podcast. This is a discussion, so it's informal, and what we love about that is you do hear some noise. This is a real thing happening, but it keeps the flow and it keeps it authentic, like I said. So Electrolux, okay, and I think it's well documented that you've made some really, I think, big changes in Electrolux, and I'm sure, well, I know that global project that we did went on to become NVO6. And that's still to this day when I look in the shops at Electrolux, which I do. I love the brand, and I'm really fond of the brand and emotionally connected to it. And when I see those products, even today, you can see the remnants of what we did back then. So it's really beautiful to see that coming through on the products. So that was Electrolux. And we've got a lot to get through because you've been in a lot of places. So I'd like to talk a little bit now about HP because you ran the design team there. And it'd be great to understand how you set that up and your approach to design at HP.
Well, maybe for context, worth just mentioning a couple steps in between. So after Italy, I was asked to move up to Sweden, to Stockholm, to the head office of Electrolux, to take on a more global position, to redefine the brand globally and set the design standards globally, which was a huge challenge. I left Electrolux after a little while because we were starting to see that mature to a point where it wasn't engaging me anymore.
Yeah.
So I joined another company, a Swedish company called Assa Abloy, who in doors and door opening solutions and locks and things like that, where they'd acquired a brand called Yale.
Yeah.
Yale was an Anglo-American brand that had gone off the boil many years ago, and they did spend a lot of money and we had to reinvent it. So they hired me as actually not design lead, but VP of innovation, which was an amazing opportunity because now I got to influence the engineering stack and the product pipeline and the product roadmap. And part of that was also leveraging a digital door locking solution company we'd bought in Korea. And we retook that platform and applied it with the Yale consumer brand and took that around the world, first into South Africa, into Taiwan, and then into North America and Australia. But what that did was get me into the world of connected products and digital products. And on the basis of that, I was then spotted by HP, who asked me to move to California to head up their experience design team. Now, when I took the job, it seemed like a major step backwards, a huge brand, 400,000 people, 120 billion turnover. But when I got there, I was shocked to find the design team was perhaps 30, maybe 40. Nobody really knew how many designers were in the organization. So job number one was pull up the records, the HR records, and then I became a forensic accountant for 6 months, finding where money was spent on design.
That's interesting.
And it wasn't only spent internally on design, it was spent externally with some great agencies. But nobody had an overview, nobody had control over it. So my first year was consolidating the design spend and making sure that we could get value and track value from the money spent.
Yeah.
And actually delivered quite a few savings in the process of that as well, because nobody really knew what they were buying from these agencies. I remember going into the CEO's office, and behind his desk was a series of bookshelves filled with beautiful models of laptops and handheld devices and printers. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic that you respect design. You've got all these first off prototypes here. He said, no, none of this ever happened. This was all design fantasy.
Okay.
Okay, but did it influence anything? Not really.
The C-word, concept work. Okay.
So I said, okay, well, how about within future, you only have things in your office which actually make it through to production? I said, yeah, but the products we produce don't live up to these.
Yeah.
Well, let's make that an ambition.
Yeah.
And that was what we did. So we set about re-engineering design, looking at the impact design, looking at how we integrated design into the organization. It was an interesting model compared to Electrolux because about 50% of the total budget was spent internally on design directors and creative direction and strategic design. And then 50% we could use with the best agencies for the job.
Yeah.
So I got to work with, everybody from IDEO to DesignWorks to Teague, Astro Studios, Native Design in London, all the big agencies, Smart Design, and we pulled them in according to the design brief and who could do the best job for that brief. And our internal designers lived and worked in those environments and understood and benefited from that. It helped them grow as individual designers as well.
I guess that nice link between external designers and internal designers, because internal designers are plugged very much into the tapestry of the organization, so they can really probably understand the assets in place, how we can leverage different things, but mixing them initially to grew the team out, I guess, was interesting.
For instance, you have two extremes on a brief. You have one range of products which you're trying to go after a younger target audience.
Yeah.
And so I would go, for instance, in that case, to Brett Lovelady at Astro Studios in San Francisco. You walk into Astro Studios and they had literally at the time a skateboard ramp in their entrance.
Yeah.
These guys had just done Astro Gaming, and that was the world they lived in, was that gaming world. And so it was just second nature to them to design for that audience.
Yeah.
So it was a no-brainer. Then we wanted something more premium, luxury, upmarket. And I'd go to BMW Design Works in Orange County, LA. And there I would walk into the studio and I'd see the next generation Rolls-Royce Phantom or the next Learjet concept. And that was the world they were operating in on a day-to-day basis. So we could learn from all of those other influences that they were having and bring that into our core DNA as well.
I heard a really interesting story that from you, where you had an interface with Steve Jobs when you were at HP. Maybe you could just share that experience.
Scary moments of your life, yeah. Well, it was a defining moment as well.
Because I guess Steve Jobs at Apple, he was known as being quite a strong character. So I guess it's,
yeah. Well, this is way back in the distant past when iPhone 1 had just been released. Google Nexus 1 had just come out. So we were transitioning. Everybody was on BlackBerries, and everybody was convinced the future of phones was BlackBerries with a little thumbnail, tiny keypads and everything. And anyway, we got these new touch screens out, and so that was all happening. At HP, we were developing the Palm OS, the Palm Pilot, and with it, the Palm operating system, which actually still is a superior operating system, and Apple and so forth have borrowed a lot from there.
Interesting.
But Steve, at the time, Apple were one of the biggest partners we had. Microsoft obviously were the biggest, but Apple were also huge because we were selling printers, for instance. And Apple users tended to spill more colored ink than Microsoft users would, Windows users would. So it was an important customer for us. Now, the products at the time weren't particularly good. The printers were kind of gray boxes with poor interfaces and not particularly good quality. But worse than that, if you needed to print a document, you had to download print drivers.
Of course.
And you could never find the driver for that printer that matched that release of that operating system at that time.
You kind of forget about them now, but you really did have to.
It was a nightmare. You just wanted to print a bloody document and you couldn't do it. So Steve Jobs, doing what he did at the time, said, he called the CEO, Mark Hurd at HP, and said, out of respect for Bill and Dave's legacy, and he had a loving relationship with HP because they gave him his first start.
Yeah, that's right.
He said, I'm giving you the heads up. I'm going to remove print from the next release of the operating system. And I'm going to delist all the HP printers out of the Apple stores.
Wow.
And now, bear in mind, this was 30 billion turnover of HP, thereabouts, was on printing. And this would make a significant dent in that if we were to lose Apple users. 15, 20 billion worth of risk here. So Hurd said to him, can you give us a chance to remedy this? What can we do to fix this? And he said, well, think about the experience. He said, I don't know what you mean, Steve, but we'll come and see you. So I was summoned along with a few others to go visit Cupertino and then have this confrontation, this meeting. We're in a room and I said, well, what can we do to fix this? He said, you need to fix the experience. He said, we don't know what you're talking about, Steve. What is that? And he said, he knows. He's the designer. He knows what to do. So then we jump in a jet back down to San Diego and we thought, what do you need? What do you need to do this? And I said, well, I need a full stack engineering team to do it. Firmware engineers, software engineers, industrial design, and let's set the parameters. So we set our physical parameters for the mechanical platform as minimum as possible in terms of height and depth. Should be no bigger than a ream of paper. So that was the target. Fit, feel, finish should be on a quality level of Apple products, and the power books and things had just come out with the aluminium cases and so on. So we should aim for that.
That's a huge jump for HP in quality.
Massive jump for them. But most importantly, the interface with the operating system has to be seamless. Anyway, long story short, we the firmware engineers worked their magic, and we came up with something which is now known as AirPrint. So if you've got any HP printing device on your Wi-Fi network, or within Bluetooth range actually, and you have an Apple operating iOS or operating system, You can just hit print, it will find the HP printer, and you can just print directly to it without having to do any downloads or anything else. The final printer we produced, the hardware, was the HP Envy, which was a folded aluminium, formed aluminium case, stolen fit feel finish from the PowerBook, exactly color matched.
And glass in there, I guess.
On the top, no plastic, just glass.
Wow.
The user interface was a TFT touchscreen, which had scroll graphics from the Palm OS on it as well, with the little cards in metaphors on there. Sent that up to Cupertino. Steve looked at it and said, let me live with it for a weekend. And then we got the call on the Monday morning saying, we're all good. I'm going to keep the print.
Wow. So, I mean, so that's a great example where, obviously the intervention of Steve, which is fortunate, but a great example where design has led, let's say, a shift in the organization, but actually not just a shift in the physical product, but at the full interaction. The benefit to the consumer, everything has been delivered, which may have taken HP a lot longer to get to had that not been that kind of intervention. And also Steve's vision for what design could do, the power of design. The HP story is an amazing one, I think, and for many designers who weren't aware of that. And just hearing about that kind of, I guess, intervention, if you'd like to call it, or gentle nudge from Apple. It's amazing what you were able to do, and that changed, of course, the course of printing in the whole organization, and probably how your team interacted. I'd like to move on now to another shared passion of ours, which is Philips. Again, that's where I worked for a number of years. When I left Electrolux the first time, I went to work in the Netherlands for Philips in Eindhoven in the Witte and I love my time there. It was an amazing company. I got to design all their plasma TV range, their design line sets. It really was. It was one of the most design focused companies of that time. Now, you had the arduous task, of course, of taking over the entire thing. So maybe you could give us an insight into that, because I think it was more than 700 designers you had as reports.
Yeah.
And I know you moved into a business context as well. So that would be really interesting to talk about the relationship between design and business. So let's unpack all of that.
Yeah, so I was having a very nice life in California, in sunny San Diego, enjoying life. New baby just arrived as well. So we were pretty settled and very happy over there. And then I got a call from a headhunter. Would I be interested in talking about a role in Philips as the chief design officer? And obviously, Stefano had been there 20 years. He was a legend in the design industry. And to be even in the consideration list was amazing. So, of course, I'm happy to talk to them, but not really looking for another role right now. Anyway, I had 2 or 3 discussions, including with Stefano. And I was invited to come visit them in Amsterdam. I went over there, and bear in mind that at this point, not only had we done the Apple project, we'd basically connected all of our devices to the internet. This was the first inkling of IoT. Yeah. So all of our products were now thin clients of the internet and connecting and sending data back and forth. Yep. So we could ship printers, which would then immediately plug them in, would download firmware over the cloud. Before the cloud was even the cloud, And I'm landing there in Amsterdam in this very beige, very gray office in the middle of Amsterdam, meeting, honestly, a very old management team. And I was asked to talk about the cloud. What is this? And should Philips be worried about it? And so this was my first alarm bells. It's like, this company's past its prime. Yeah, they're amazing. They've done the CD, they did Blu-ray, they did the compact disc, and they've all of these amazing technologies, but have they kind of lost their way now? So I wasn't convinced at all. So I went back to San Diego, said, yeah, it was great, but no, I'm not going to make any moves. Another 3-4 months went by, and I was invited to come back to Amsterdam and meet the incoming CEO, the guy who was going to take over. So I reluctantly agreed to it, but I wouldn't even give up a work day because vacation time in the US is difficult to get.
Yeah, of course.
So I flew over a weekend, and on a Sunday morning, I met Frans van Houten, the incoming CEO. And at 8:30 on a Sunday morning, I landed at 6, got a shower, straight down to breakfast. He walked in, and then for the next 4 hours, we just talked about what he knew, what he observed about Philips and the current trajectory, what he felt needed to happen and where he wanted it to go, and why he felt design had to change, but should be a building block for the future Philips as well. And that he very much wanted me to be a part of it. So he convinced me to make the move. So that was the start. When I landed, I was initially, Stefano was still there. And so the idea was that I would take on the responsibility for the consumer products to begin with, which was a big portfolio.
Yeah.
And then over time, learn the ways of Stefano, learn the ways of Philips, and then take over Stefano's role down the line. That was the plan. It didn't quite work out that way. Things got accelerated pretty quickly. And after 8 weeks, I was pushed into the top job. But it was a great, a scary time, but a great time as well.
Yeah, just one part before we go on to the next phase. I'd just like to just hone in on a thing that we've discussed before on the podcast, which is about, and somebody asked me this recently, actually, in a magazine interview, and they asked me about, why do you go to certain companies? And I think just something you just said was really interesting, which is, I think design often needs a sponsor. So, the advice I give to people when they're looking for that next job as well is for you to interview the company, because you should really understand who is the leader, what is the leadership team, what do they plan to do, what are they capable of doing, what's the scope of the role? Because I think for design to really shift and to become a big part of the culture of the organization, you need that sponsorship.
Yeah, you can't do it alone. You need sponsorship. You need to build trust, for sure. You need to build relationships. You need to understand what's driving the motivation of the other functions as well. As designers, we often talk about practicing empathy. Empathic design is one of the key principles of everything I've done. But empathy isn't just for end users. It's empathy for the CEO,
Absolutely.
for the shareholders,
for your peers,
for the
colleagues,
supply
for everybody,
chain, for manufacturing, for marketing. Understand what they need in the relationship, and then you can get partners to help you develop and move the company forwards.
Yeah, I guess that's a challenge for most creatives, though. Moving, you're often educated in a certain way, then all of a sudden, when you get thrust into C-level positions, you really are dealing, and your job as a leader is to, how do you unite all of those aspects of the company? And also at the same time, you really need to orchestrate the entire consumer experience for the external consumer. But how do you start with uniting? And like you say, empathy is a great word for finance. Empathy is a great word for understanding the financial worries of the financial leader, of the marketing team, of the CEO. What's the big vision? Because our ability as designers, I think one of our gifts is the fact that we can take all of those complex problems, and what we can do that's very unique is we can visualize them perhaps in a context that doesn't exist, that could unite all those teams.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that Philips Design has, Philips Design is 100 years old. You and I were celebrating that earlier this year.
We were at a party together. What was that called? An alumni event, which was amazing. Amazing to see everybody together, actually. Wasn't
Philips designers have gone on to change the world for companies all around the world. So that's an amazing legacy that Philips Design has. But when I came into Philips Design, they'd effectively gone into a little bit of a bubble. So we were known for conceptual work, for blue sky thinking, for looking over the horizon and doing provocations about where the world was heading. But meanwhile, the businesses were more and more distant and couldn't relate to those visions at all. And so part of my job number one was to bring design back into the fold of the businesses, to make sure that the businesses understood the value designers could deliver on the current product portfolio and in their future roadmaps as well. One of the things that we also did early on was that design thinking was something that I'd started to practice at HP. I'd worked with IDEO and Jump Associates and a number of other companies there. We had a great strategic design practice in HP with Sam Lucenti and Deb Mrazek. And we were able to bring a lot of that thinking now into Philips.
Obviously, coming from Electrolux, I remember hearing you speak about being excited about some of their particular product range. We'll talk about how you moved on to medical and how you actually helped to transform the entire business of Philips in medical. But just, I remember you talking a little bit about from your history, Electrolux being quite interested to work on a vacuum cleaner. But that was quite an interesting project. And in terms of quality, maybe you could talk a little bit about
I mean, as I said, when I first landed, my job number one was, my first role, let's put it that way, was leading design for the consumer business, so CDO for the consumer business, which included domestic appliances at the time, included TV, consumer electronics, huge portfolio. But we had a very enthusiastic guy leading domestic appliances, and particularly one of his focus areas was the floor care division, the vacuum cleaners. And he was excited to learn I'd spent time at Electrolux. So he came to see me almost like the first week and said, I saw what you guys did with Ergo Rapido, which was the first stick cleaner that, we took stick cleaners from being 50 euros to 200 euros and delivered far superior experiences with it. We did global launches of this product. It reshaped a market. And he said, I need you to do that for me now. So go one better than Ergo Rapido. So we started down that journey, and we eventually did. And I think the products we produced at Philips today are even better than the Electrolux ones, but maybe I'm a little biased now. But along the way, we also had other floor cleaning solutions. And we had one product which was supposed to clean hard floors. So it was called the Aqua Trio, which did mopping and vacuuming together to clean your hard floors, which is still an ongoing challenge. Anyway, we got this product out the door, and the field failure rate was horrible. I mean, these things were breaking down, and service calls were terrible. The Amazon ratings were really bad. Now, I was fortunate that the CEO of the consumer business at the time had zero tolerance for poor quality. A guy called Peter Noter, who came from Beiersdorf and the Nivea brand, cosmetics brand, ended up at BMW, funnily enough, as the head of sales and marketing and brand at BMW. But at the time, we needed to do a reset on how quality was perceived in the company. So I actually pulled in the heads of design from BMW and a few other places. And we did a whole day with all the business leaders and all the people leading innovation and marketing across the consumer businesses to reset what quality meant to them and make them personally responsible for Amazon ratings, for instance. So and it became part of their KPIs, part of their annual objectives, to make sure that no product was released or left in the market that had a rating of less than 4.5. And that we had to up our game on customer experience, responsiveness, and field failure rates and things like that. But it was a complete reset. And that was, again, top down. I had the support of Peter and the executive team. So we did that,
That's incredible. I mean, it's something that we do. We consider ourselves, we're a purpose-driven brand at Lixil, but also we're very consumer-centric. So for us, how we measure quality now is actually, and you speak about perceived quality, we call it fit, feel, finish. These are, if you just measure quality on warranty costs or even, let's say, feedback from consumers in the field, you may never get there if at the point of sale, the interaction with that product is poor, that consumers won't even consider you to purchase you. So you can't measure even that metric. So what we're looking at is really the perceived quality. Of course, you have to have, of course, the functionality aspect, but the perceived quality is incredibly important. And that fit, feel, finish, as we call it, that really conveys your brand positioning, also your commitment, because if you're into that level of detail, consumers really have confidence in your product.
And that's where, being exposed to like automotive designers, like the guys at DesignWorks at BMW, there's a guy called Holger Hanft who was my primary interface there at DesignWorks, who's now the head of design at Mini, by the way.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But what I learned from those guys was the automotive mantra of first, second, third read. So you look at the silhouette from a distance and think, oh, that looks great, that car profile. Then you get closer and you start to pick up on the details. And, it's still attractive. I still want to go drive this vehicle. And then you get in it, and everything you touch from that moment should reinforce the feeling that you had, the perception that you had. But if you grab the door handle and it's flimsy, if you slam the door shut and it's tinny, if you hold the steering wheel and there's movement, or you flick a switch and it doesn't move, as it doesn't give a good feedback, all of those things are going to create a cognitive dissonance that will destroy your trust in the product and the brand. And if it works on a car, it definitely works on a vacuum cleaner, an electric razor, or a toothbrush as well.
Yeah.
Strangely enough,
Yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, there will be a thread through this chat, I'm sure. But like the printer that you produced at HP, glass, aluminium, real materials, much better quality. And then you move on to the vacuum cleaner. There you're looking again at the quality and the perceived quality and how things are handled. And of course, the functionality.
Just on that one, sorry, on the design quality day that we did, we had a little bit the Ergo Rapido story at Electrolux, where we redefined and reshaped a category. In the powered toothbrush market, we have the Sonicare brand. And powered toothbrushes in the market are retailing 50, 60 euros, 70, $80, that kind of ballpark figure. And we came with a new product, the Diamond Clean, as it was called, which was an iconic, beautiful piece of design. And as many people will claim to have worked on this, and they all did for sure. So I'm not going to make any responsibility for it. But anyway, it's rather than having a plastic docking station, we had an actual piece of glass and an induction charger underneath it in a nicely milled piece of aluminium. And so you've just put the toothbrush in the glass. This is a natural kind of interaction in a bathroom environment.
Yeah.
But this thing retailed at $200, no, actually more, $399 when it first came out, $400. Versus a market norm of $70, $80 in the US. And so nobody trusted. Everybody wanted to start cost reducing, reduce the bill of materials, get rid of this piece of glass, move it to plastic, all the rest of it. We resisted. We said, no, let's trial it. So thankfully, again, with the support of the CEO, we were able to launch in the Japanese market to begin with, prove that consumers were willing to pay the extra for a premium product and a premium experience. It was hugely successful in Japan. It became the #1 selling toothbrush in Japan within a year. We took it into the US and into Western Europe, and it became the best-selling toothbrush around the world, powered toothbrush around the world.
Wow.
At this 3 times the norm price point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we had Robert Bruner on previous podcast, who obviously was fundamental in the whole development of Beats by Dr. Dre. And that was another category defining paradigm shift in terms of the value proposition, turning it upside down. All of a sudden, what was a tiny premium headphone market, all of a sudden turning on its head, and all of a sudden, not just Beats by Dr. Dre, but it had a profound effect on all brands in that category. And I guess, again, and Japan's an interesting market for launching. I know James Dyson launched his first vacuum cleaners there because there is a real appreciation of quality and how that product interacts and how it feels in use and stuff. I think Japan's an amazing market for that, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, so Philips, a little bit about that stuff, but I'd love to concentrate and move on to, this transformation into healthcare and all the work you've done in healthcare with Philips.
Well, one of in the roadmap that Frans van Houten, the CEO, laid out to me when we had that sort of Sunday morning meeting in Amsterdam before I came on board, he'd said, we're a diversified industrial conglomerate, which is the technical term for the way Philips was organized. So we had a holding company mindset with multiple businesses, and the holding company would basically collect the money every year and report that back to shareholders. But there's very little synergy between the businesses. And he felt that model had reached the end of the line, and certain businesses like the TV and consumer electronics were becoming highly commoditized, and the value was becoming extremely difficult to continue to chase. Yeah. So his plan then was to exit those businesses and to begin to focus the company in fewer, better, and bigger and better opportunity spaces. Okay. And so we did a global scan as to what does the world need going forwards? Where are the biggest opportunities going to be? And what do we have in terms of capabilities, assets, and positions with the Philips brand that we could use and leverage in going after one of those opportunity spaces? Yeah. So we did a big piece of work with strategy to think about this and to think about where we were heading. And we netted out as health and wellness as being the big opportunity space. So with that, we then set on a divestment program. So sold off the TV business, sold off the consumer electronics business, eventually all the way through to selling off lighting. Mm-hmm. Now, Philips was a 130-year-old lighting company at the time. And you can imagine there were people demonstrating in the streets.
Yeah.
Franz had a very hard time personally.
Yeah.
People attacking him, as it were, because he was ripping the heart out of the company, is the way it was perceived. But the focus was, let's become a health tech company. And we used the word health tech rather than med tech because we weren't just about delivering the medical technology. We're really concerned about an end-to-end philosophy of keeping people healthy. And that meant we could continue to leverage our positioning within the consumer space, because Philips had a brand which was present in everybody's lives, whether it through light bulbs or TVs or consumer electronics. So consumers knew us as a brand. But then you would be a little bit surprised when you went into a hospital and you'd see Philips monitors or Philips CTs or X-rays and so on. But we were there. So we wanted to continue that. So we came up with a concept called the health continuum. So helping people live a healthy life. If they did get sick, then we would do personalized and individualized protocols to treat them because we know them better, because we know and understand the way they live their lives. And we would advocate for minimally invasive surgical techniques, so minimally invasive cardiology and things like that. And then also improve the experience with a consumer mindset in the healthcare domain as well, and get people into their homes as soon as possible afterwards. So that was the kind of pivot we made as a brand.
Wow. I mean, and quite some pivot. And moving into that area, obviously you've got a huge design team, 700 people. How do you refocus, rebalance, retrain people in a completely different area? And what kind of processes of leadership did you have to put in place?
So, it meant saying goodbye to certain parts of the team, because when you sell a business, you sell everything and everybody that is associated with that business. So when we sold the TV business, I had lead designers responsible for each of these business categories. So the case of TV, it was a guy we both know, Rod White, was leading that. So Rod took his team and went with that business and continued to operate there. Same with lighting, same with consumer electronics. They spun out and went with the company or that bought those parts of the businesses. But then when we re-looked at where we're going as a business, we then had to refocus in terms of what are the capabilities and competencies and what's the craft we need in the design team in order to get into this healthcare domain. So that meant we needed more user interface, user experience designers who could do enterprise type software, not build an app, but do something that a hospital could run its fleet of MRIs or CT machines on, or consolidate patient data from patient monitoring devices on a population health level. So it meant redefining the capabilities and across the design organization there, and locations as well. Fewer, better, bigger locations. They still ended up with 16 different design studios around the world. And we took some dips over time in terms of numbers of people, but then as we acquired new businesses, opened up new businesses, we acquired new teams with them as well. So we were between 700-800 designers at any given time, operating in 16 studios around the world.
I guess that's the thing when you're building a business like that, I guess, that's relatively new. It's knowing what to build and what to buy, isn't it? It's knowing where your expertise is and what you have to acquire.
Yeah.
And how did you find in terms of the design team competence and let's say, and their skill set, how did that work with your new way of working? Because I know you introduced a complete new way of working, much more inclusive of the whole organization working together.
So one of the things we were really looking for, as we do in the consumer business, it's norm to go out and do contextual research, people research in their homes, see how they're operating the devices of today, and then start to look forwards about emerging technologies. We said, well, let's take that and now scale that in the context of healthcare. So go into hospitals, work with nurses, work with clinicians, interview patients, and make sure we understand how healthcare is being delivered today and where our devices and our technology and our services can fit within that context. And that proved to be really popular with the customers because they felt they had a voice. These nurses had never been asked.
Yeah, of course.
The clinicians and doctors had to do a little bit more thinking about, well, why am I doing it this way? Just because that's the way we've been doing it for 100 years.
Yeah.
Isn't there a better way to do it? And we started to reframe using classical design thinking approaches, reframe the question, reframe the challenge, before you get into ideation, and then involve them, work with them, design with them, not for them. That was a fundamental principle. Because a lot of medtech devices are designed somewhere in the lab and then parachuted into the hospital. We said, no, this is our living lab. We will create within the hospital. And there's many videos online you can find of co-creation with nurses and so forth. So that was part of it. Now, that drove an engagement that we'd never seen before from a sales and marketing side as well, which is an unintended consequence of that approach. So maybe one of the stories to look at here is we were working in Westchester Medical Center in Hudson Valley in New York, big hospital system. And they'd asked us to look at their pediatric fluoroscopy X-ray division for children. And improve the experience. Now, we had some great solutions already around helping take the stress out of X-rays and imaging for children, making them feel less anxious, engaging them in positive ways, so they wouldn't need to be sedated to get good quality images. So we designed this, and it worked very, very well. But they then said, could you do that for adults? Could you do that across the entire imaging department? So we did. On the back of that, they said, well, we're acquiring new hospitals all the time into our system. Could you help us in how to best integrate that and how to make use of the assets? So it turned into a bigger strategic discussion, of which we were also able to, of course, sell through Philips equipment into that area. Anyway, that turned into a long-term strategic partnership. And then the value of that was 800 million plus to Philips in terms of a 10-year deal of sale of equipment and services to them. But more importantly, we were able to help them define and shape the patient and clinical experiences to deliver better outcomes at lower cost over the next 10 years. So when Franz saw this approach, he said, okay, this is great. Now, how do I scale that? Take that to other markets and make this our way of working. So that's when I was asked to take on the role of leading the business of healthcare transformation, which was multiple business units. I had 200 consultants, former chief medical officers, chief nursing officers, CIOs and department heads, people who'd lived and worked in the roles inside hospitals, put those together with design thinkers, and that's how we drove the consulting division. Then we acquired a business called Hospital Integrated Planning Services, who designed and built hospitals. They would look at the population health requirements, and on the basis of that would define how many hospital beds, how many X-ray machines, how many CTs you need and things. And then we would design and build a hospital for them, including architects who could do all the BIM models, the Revit models. We'd do simulation modeling to look at reducing dwell times and waiting times and optimize flows for patients, all the rest of it. So we got digital twins of hospitals where we could walk the investors or the CEO or the nurses or the patients through in a digital environment before we actually even physically built anything.
Wow. I mean, we'll come on to prototyping in a bit, because obviously I'm a big fan of prototyping, and that's where it shows its true value, that you can do this real time. But just, I mean, you've kind of answered this question before I ask it, but in what you just explained, and about how you generated, let's say, basically a whole new business opportunity, and the CEO sponsored that and could see the value in that. That's amazing. My question was going to be, because what's quite unique, we have lots of guests on facets of design, right? But what's quite interesting is your transition back and forth from design to business, from business to design. So I'm going to ask you the most difficult question that we ever get asked, which is, how do you define the return on investment in design? I mean, there's an example you've just given, but how could we, to share with the people listening and watching this podcast, how do you define and how do you communicate the return on investment?
I think the business return is as I've just described, and that's fairly logical. But make sure you're tracking that and managing that and celebrating that when you do it. The fact that we were able to go to the C-suite of Philips and say, and the shareholders and the board, and say, this is what we do, this is how we work, and here's the evidence that this produces value for Philips and its customers. And that helps, build confidence that you're doing the right things there.
I've got two things there. I mean, it's quite interesting to hear you say this, because, about we've done a few things with the DBA. I'm going to talk about that later with you, but I remember being in a discussion a few weeks ago, and we were talking about how do you record and track the ROI. And one example I gave, we're very fortunate at Lixor that design is embedded into the culture of the company across all of our brands, and what we do, we have the space, if you like, because of the sponsorship we have, and it's a C-level position for design in the organization. But because of this confidence that we've built over a number of years and equity, if you like, we have this 80-20 split, I call it. So it's 80%, product development. We work very, very closely with the business, 100%, really trying to always push forward, understand what context will exist, using ethnography, all of those other markers of what we call pre-search, giving us really good indicators of how we better serve the consumer and better serve the business. But we also have this 20% in our design team where we're allowed to experiment and learn. Experiment and learn are one of the key behaviors in the Lixor organization.
Yeah.
And that 20% for us now, because I've actually been in the organization in various positions for 20 years, now we can track over that period. There are certain things that we have done that were completely initiated by design, and we can track the revenue of those and just the revenue of those things that came out of that 20%. If you look at the ROI on those, it's one of the best business, I guess, investments you could have made. So it's an easy sell if you look at it in that context. But like you say, you have to track that and you have to remind people, because sometimes, our job, and you spoke about empathy during this discussion, and you just mentioned again when you're talking about healthcare, really considering, did the patient have a better experience? Our job as designers is a tough one, because we have to lead the business. I always say in our group, we're the objective barometer of the organization. Now, what does that mean? That means our role is to ensure that what we're doing is adding value. Our role is to ensure that maybe what the business would like to do is stay in the comfort lane of working within their asset set. But our job actually is to say, be the objective barometer and deliver that bad news. If you're in, if you're Kodak, whatever, and you're in cellulose film, telling them, I know we've got lots of cellulose factories, but actually maybe we need to be looking in a different direction. So we have this role and responsibility, which is to the consumer and the user. And that's quite an interesting role. I don't think it's one that design's credited enough with. And on top of that, I think having that role, we have to bring that back into, when you have an absence of design in organizations, design has this ability to join up all of these different departments and bring these elements together. That what I've noticed in companies that are design mature, that understand and use design correctly, versus ones that don't, is that becomes more fragmented. And then when I do the forensics on those kind of brands, which we have, you start to see that disjointed organization can never provide an end-to-end consumer experience. So I just wanted to I know it's a very complex thing I've tried to describe, but I just wanted to get your take on that.
It comes back to where we started the discussion with like the GBJ 2000, think 10 years ahead, and where as a company are we going to be, where are consumers going to be, and how do we make sure that as a company we're ready, fit and able to serve those consumers of the future. And going back as a healthcare example, and also thinking about, is your design organization fit for purpose to create value in the future? We did a project and we looked at them as positive provocations. That's the way, because blue sky and concept work doesn't work. Positive provocations, play on words. So we looked at the NICU space, the neonatal intensive care unit. So babies which are born prematurely need a special kind of intensive care. They're not simply miniature human beings. They're complete aliens, the pediatricians would tell me. Their anatomy is completely different. Their chemical makeup is all different. Nothing is the same in these microscopic, tiny, tiny babies, really fragile. So we had lots of research going on in the advanced development teams around this space about what we could do. We had businesses out there. We were talking with pediatric care facilities, NICUs and pediatric intensive care specialists about the needs of these patients. But it wasn't coming together as a strategy. We didn't really have a focused business there. So we said, okay, well, let's build a concept car here.
Yeah.
So we built the NICU of the future in Eindhoven, and we integrated every piece of emerging technology and also integrated all the new care thinking around care pathways around premature babies into this. Then we pulled in 2,500 key opinion leaders from around the world, from every corner of the world, to come in and kick the tires and tell us what was good, what was bad, what we were missing, and what should we do more of. At the end of that, we created this massive pull from the markets. We need this and we need it now. Don't wait 10 years, get this into the market as soon as possible. So on the back of that, it helped us prioritize our product roadmap, our innovation roadmap. We knew where to spend our dollars, where to invest, and how to go out and do that. And on the back of that, just before I left Philips, we opened a 40-bed pediatric intensive care unit in Florida, which took the essence of what we'd created there, using existing off-the-shelf technology wherever possible to get it into the market and save lives now rather than in 10 years.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, when you can accelerate things like that, so they can save so many lives and they can transform patient care in so many ways. And having that ability to obviously have the long term and catalog what you plan to do and have a strategy, but actually to be able to peel off some things that also for the organization generate immediate revenue, but also they do real good. I just wanted to move you forward because you've had so many different positions. We've covered some of the big ones, the Philips, the HP, the Electroluxes and some of the big brands. But actually what I'd like to know is, post Philips, because you've done so many things. Every forum, everywhere I go, your name seems to pop up. I know I was invited to be, because I used to be on the board of directors of the Design Business Association, as did you. And I know I agreed to be a judge. And I'll talk a bit later about design community. The reason why I do this is because, and these roles are unpaid, but it's because it's about building design community again. But I was a judge, and then your name popped up again that you're chairing the round this year. So I'd just like to say, okay, so post Philips, what have you been doing? Because you seem to be on so many things, doing so many things.
Well, that one, just to continue that. So Design Effectiveness Awards is a really important award in my mind because it helps provide proof points and give evidence of the value design creates. It's not a beauty parade, as many design awards are. It is evaluated by panels of judges who consist not only of design leaders, but also CEOs and chief marketing officers, heads of brand, so business people, as we like to think about them. And what we look at is you have to have more than 2 years of evidence of the success of the outcome of a design proposal, of a design product, concept or service. And and you have to disentangle and prove that they didn't do a lot of above the line advertising or that all the competitors went away and you were the only product on the market. All of that stuff is taken into account, and categorically design is proven to have added the value there. And so I think that's a great celebration. And as a design leader, you need to look on that website, the Design Effectiveness Awards at the DBA, and it will help give you evidence that you can take into your business and get the investments that you're looking for. So that's why I do that one.
And we had Deborah on actually. She's if you look through our podcast list, Deborah Dorton was one of the speakers or one of the guests on our podcast. And she invites people to, like you say, to go on, see the case studies. There's lots of rich information the DBA offer that can give designers and people transitioning into a design leadership role, give them really insightful information and levers, if you like, that they can pull to further.
I still really like the big design awards, the glossy design awards. I mean, we won Design Team of the Year, as you have done. So, and it's something special about being on stage with the Porsche design and, the Ferrari designers, having dinner with them. All of that is amazing. And I think it's really important as we get into this kind of dialogue about strategic design and design thinking that we don't lose sight of the fundamental need for good quality craftsmanship in design, that love of the beauty of an object, the love of the surface of an object, the material fit, feel, and finish, the sound, the weight, that kind of more expressive interaction around a design. We still need forums where we can celebrate that. So I still, by all means, Red Dot and IF and all those guys.
Yeah, they're
still a
phenomenal.
role
Yeah,
for that.
absolutely.
But DBA is something different. No, but beyond that, which is, it's a lot of work reading through multiple case studies.
I was up late last night actually reading. I just have a
so
fraction
many
of yours.
Yeah, exactly. I'm doing all the panels, the pre-judging and then judging, and then the Grand Prix winners. So,
but they're so insightful, aren't they? I mean, I just think that
I
it's
learn
incredible.
all the time. Yeah, so that's why I do it.
It's like a PhD in design, but within a few days.
Yeah. But beyond that, since leaving Philips, I've taken on a role with a company in Azerbaijan where I'm the chair of the innovation board and advisor to the CEO. It's a funny, large company. It's a holding company that's in the world of banking, consumer banking, corporate banking, insurance, real estate. They design, build, and operate some of the biggest brand hotels in the world: JW Marriott, Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, across the region. They operate supermarket chains across the region, and agrotech and dairy as well. So what we're doing is helping them find new ways to innovate and increase the impact of the innovation dollars that they're spending as well. Which is really nice to be in a completely new culture, completely new part of the world that I knew nothing about, and immersing myself in that. So that's one of my roles right now. I also work with a good friend, Simona Rocchi and Lina, who set up the Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design. They're strangely, perversely built, based in Bergamo, Italy.
Oh, wow.
But through them, I'm helping them set up innovation courses in healthcare, but also working with some of the largest football organizations in the world right now. And I also joined a platform called Group of Humans.
Yes.
And Group of Humans is an eclectic bunch of creative thinkers. That's probably how I can best describe it. So I've got good friends from ex-IDEO, global creative director and the former CEO, Paul Bennett and Sandy Spiker. Astronauts.
I was going to say, is Tim Brown involved in that at all?
Tim's not. I'm working with Tim on something else, a couple of other things.
Because I met Tim at Davos a few years ago.
One AI project with Tim, and then another, well, I guess it's AI as well, but a community-based thing. But yeah, IDEO alumni are everywhere as well, of course. So working with those guys on that. But then we've got astronauts, NASA engineers, few rock stars. In fact, we're doing a redefinition of a brand for a current rock star at the moment. We're doing the next lunar landing of a vehicle on the moon.
Wow.
And doing some really cool projects on some startups as well. And then I work with a bunch of West Coast startups in the medtech space, and just picking up a project right now in Switzerland with another healthcare, personal care kind of startup as well. And
I know you're really active in design for good as well. That's something you're really
So when one of the things we did at Philips very well, I think, was Stefano started this project called Philanthropy by Design. So every year the designers would be given time to work on a project that would impact people's lives in a positive way in under-resourced communities like in Africa or slums in India, things like that. Now, one of the challenges I had when I saw some of the work that was done was it made great design stories, but it didn't impact lives. And then we had one project in particular that was impacting lives called the Chula stove, which was done just before I arrived there. And for years, it remained as a model and a concept and a PowerPoint and all the rest of it, and a great story, won multiple awards. But it wasn't until we released the intellectual property to an NGO and they were able to release it out into the wild that it started to really scale and have impact. And then we saw Chula stoves being built all around the world. So that made me question the kind of model. So when a bunch of us as CDOs got together, including yourself, to start to think about how do we do more of that kind of work within the context of our day-to-day reality? Well, let's create an alliance where we can work on the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, to deliver impact and impact at scale around the world. And let's not be guilty of just doing design theater where we end up with nice PowerPoints and prototypes, but nobody actually benefits. So we set up and it's a UK registered charity now, Design for Good. You can have a look at designforgood.org and you'll find it. We've just released an annual report. where we hold ourselves accountable through the UN to track impact in the communities that we're serving. So our first challenge was around SDG 6 and water.
Yeah.
And we did 2 years on that. And I just presented last week in Turkey to an audience there and talked about the work we've done on everything from drilling wells in India to providing toilets in Ghana, to talking about teenage girls' menstruation education in Dominican Republic, which is now scaling into other parts of Africa and around the world. And these are important because it demonstrates back to the alliance members, and this is some of the biggest companies in the world, Lixil there, Airbus, PepsiCo, General Mills, Nestle, companies such as this. It demonstrates to them that even if it's a small seed of an idea on the ground, perhaps in Africa, you can take that idea and you can amplify it into other geographies and other markets around the world. And so it's giving tools, techniques, and an approach back to the corporate designers who are participating. Now, we also partner with the Royal College of Art on this as well, so that we can educate the design teams in the organizations on key principles and frameworks and approaches by which you should design for these, or design with, importantly, with these communities to produce meaningful and impactful solutions.
No, it's really good. I mean, I know we've got some of our team members that are about to start the course. For people listening in as well, I mean, we can give you information on that. But yeah, it's phenomenal to this concept of how can we as designers start thinking of things in a slightly different context. We're at Lixil, we really have this mission, which is to make better homes a reality for everyone everywhere. And how do we live that mission? So within our brand portfolio, everyone everywhere means we have premium brands like Grower, which are global brands, which are known for very, very premium products, and like Grower Spa even higher. But then we also have brands like Sato, which are looking at basic sanitation and access to sanitation, which has other social implications, safety for women who can't, defecate in certain proximity to where they live. So they go out into areas and they're attacked. And so there are other social implications around sanitation that with our Sato brand that we're answering these challenges, but actually as a business, it's a real business. It's not charity. We're trying to create a sustainable business that will have real impact on the world.
I showed a slide last week in Turkey. There are 3 billion people in the world today who don't have access to adequate sanitation.
Yeah, absolutely.
It causes a problem because it also impacts the groundwater, which means they also then limit their accessibility to clean drinking water.
It's amazing that you're doing all these things. I think as well, because when you get to our age, when you get to a certain age where you have all this experience, you have all these contacts, it really is important that you start to, if you're able to give back and try to work, we use this word, which is design community. It's why we started the podcast. It's why we're creating several things like our Instagram account and our, and our Pinterest accounts and stuff. They take a lot of time for us, but we're trying to create this sense of design community because there seems to be a vacuum right now in the world for design community. So we're hoping that with things like this podcast, we can inspire people to understand that, like yourself, from your education to where you've ended up and your career path, how it's, it's taken you every country, every kind of product genre, and, and it isn't linear. And, but it can be really interesting and hopefully alleviate some of the stress that people have about making decisions right now on their design education, that where will they be in X amount of time? It's just to say, lots of successful people have followed lots of different careers and it's insightful. And now we're getting to a stage where with this sense of design community, if we can build more things like Design for Good, I know the DBA Design Business Association is fantastic at sharing case studies, information. And if we can create these networks, I think ultimately more people, we at Lixil create products in our design team that 1 billion people use every day. And we have a huge responsibility, not just for the resources that we take from the planet to make all those products and stuff, but huge responsibility on how those people feel every day. And like we said at the very beginning of this discussion, you're in this built environment where every single thing is designed. Now, if we can navigate people to have a better experience and to be more positive and to live better lives through the things we do, we can change how they even interact and treat each other.
Whilst thinking about the consequences of what we're designing and the impact of what we design has on the planet.
Absolutely.
And, you know, as you're talking, I begin to feel very old. And then I remind myself last week, I was with Don Norman.
Wow.
And if anybody doesn't know Don Norman, Google Don Norman, look him up. Don is 90 this year.
Yeah.
He wrote a book which has been an iconic book for 4 decades now, The Design of Everyday Things. And he had a wake-up call a couple of years back, and he said, I've been pushing and promoting human-centered design for 30, 40 years. I realized I was wrong. We now need humanity-centered design.
Yeah.
And that's because we need to look at the impact of what we do on the entire planet and the ecosystem around it.
Yeah.
And he's just released a book on that, and he's got a fantastic new award because he wants to celebrate people who are doing good work that it positively impacts lives and doesn't damage the planet as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we talk about this huge responsibility is, you know, in every, not just in the materials that our products consume, but actually in usage. So, you know, we have, of course, in some of our portfolio of products, we have things like showers. They, you know, we can, just by understanding how consumers navigate through that space and through that experience, we can reduce consumption of the consumption of water at certain periods within that showering process that deliver an incredible experience, but actually reduce water, which is one of the main drivers, water and energy. And we call that ecological enjoyment. So that's our way of interfacing. We talk about that I guess paradox of how can you have more enjoyment but actually less resource. And that's what good design is for me. Good design is about, of course it's holistic, looking at those things, but good design is about always improving the experience. And it's not the detriment to the experience, but the great design will do that with much more intelligent in how it ships products to consumers, how it reclaims products, how we design for disassembly, and also how we actually design the experience and the user experience so that we can reduce consumption of things like energy and water in that process. So yeah, lots to do for designers. I think as designers, we have to do so many things, and we have to be across the whole organization. I think the best examples I see of companies that are using design in a good way, you really see how that's holistic and how, like you said, they're integrated into the facets of the business. I've got 3 questions that I always ask every single person that comes on the podcast. And so, keeping with tradition, if you don't mind, I will ask you the 3 questions. So what does good, and I know we've covered many of these things in our discussion, but I always ask these questions anyway. So what does good design mean to you? What's its role on a societal level? And how does it impact the everyday experience of the user?
Maybe an example of one of the projects I talked about, like the NICU, the NICU of the future, which we really put the needs of that premature baby at the core of everything we did, but understanding from day one that you've got probably two very anxious parents who are fretting about, is my baby going to be okay? How's it going to survive? How's it going to come through this? You've got a committed army of staff who are trying to take care of that baby. And now, can the technology, can the devices that we equip them with do that in a human-centric way to give the best possible outcomes for the baby, and also relieve anxiety and stress on the clinicians and the parents? And for me, that's design with impact.
Yeah, I found that really interesting when you mentioned this earlier, when you spoke about you built that incredible prototype. But what I found really interesting, my takeaway from that, just listening to you, was, but you built that prototype for all of those interfaces, for the parents as well as the child, as well as the physicians, etc. Thought that was incredible. Which designer / business leader, can be either, and especially for you, because I know you jump in and out, so it could be both. Which designer or business leader, past or present, has had the most significant influence on your perspective of design or business, and why?
I can't pin it down to one. It's, Ken Grange from the very beginning at Thorn EMI told me that, yes, you worry about the engineers, but you've also got to worry about who's going to use this product. So, Christian Klingspor, who was our boss at Electrolux, taught me about design systems before design systems were a thing. We called it design families at the time.
Yeah.
Roberto Passetta taught us our Italian maestro.
Wow, he was my
showed
guru,
us,
yeah.
he told us there's a joy in design. There has to be some love in design. There has to be expression, and you have to celebrate color and form and have fun with it.
Yeah.
Because, with Scandinavian principles of not too much, not too little, we kind of lost a little bit of that. And Roberto would put that back in for us.
Yeah.
And then Stefano also, human-centered design approach. And then more recently, as I mentioned, Don Norman with his humanity-centered approach. So it's a whole bunch of different people. And then along the way, from Steve Jobs to VJ, who was my direct boss, and Steve Nigro at HP, those guys were fantastic at seeing the opportunity of design creating value and making the space for me within the business context to bring the value into the business.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I often talk about that on the podcast, trying to advise people moving into design management and leadership is, that concept again of sponsorship and working closely to get that freedom to be able to, let's say, move and create more value within the business.
Yeah. And Franz van Houten at Philips did that in spades for me.
Yeah.
He trusted me way beyond where I was comfortable, pushed me into running, multi-million dollar business operations, which was way outside my comfort zone. And, mixed success, but I learned a lot in doing that and appreciated his support throughout.
Incredible. Okay, third and final. Love it or hate it. What's the current macro trend you can't stop thinking about? Okay. And what do you think it says about the broader cultural landscape? So love it or hate it. Which macro
Well, I
trend
mean, fresh out of Turkey last week, I was surrounded and mobbed by students from the Yasar University of Design while I was there, all wanted to know my take on AI.
Yeah.
And these were industrial designers, which was interesting because I hadn't really given it a lot of thought on the industrial design side. I mean, obviously, user interface, UX, coding, vibe coding, all of those sort of things in the software world, we see AI impacting enormously. But on the industrial design, we started to talk about it. And this is the thing Tim Brown's involved in as well right now, about how can we take some of the hard work, the donkey work, if you like, the unrewarded work out of industrial design using AI. And you think about what it takes from an early sketch to creating surfaces and all the rest of it. AI can do a lot of that work. What we shouldn't do, though, and Don Norman made this point to me last week and to the audience that we were talking with, we were on a panel together, that we shouldn't delegate creativity to AI. AI is great at looking backwards, and AI is an average of what has happened. Yeah. It synthesizes it's like doing your mood boards on the grandest possible scale, picking what you think is the best elements from those mood boards, and then consolidating that in your vision and creating an object out of that. Well, if we're only ever going to do that, looking backwards in order to create today's reality, then it's going to become a very bland, very gray, very average world.
I didn't bring up AI because we've had it. I think every guest on we've spoken about AI, so I thought I'm going to leave it out. But it's inevitable, right? You have to discuss it.
It's just there.
Absolutely, and it is. And I just wanted to share how we're using AI at Lixor. So we're using it in many, many ways, but in global design in particular, we're using this to, like you say, to create some efficiencies so we can actually free up some time to spend much more time creating a brief. And we've been doing some stuff which I think's amazing, which is we own the trademark pre-search, believe it or not. We created this some time ago, pre-search. And that is about us, before we start a project, really understanding, what the drivers. And what I found, not only is that brilliant from a starting point, but what I found is that's a way that you can align all of the stakeholders. Yeah. And we spend much more time now. We're using like I said, that efficiency from things like AI to spend more time creating that brief, understanding what we're trying to do, understanding our mid to long term plan within the organization. How can we deliver on that? But also how can we create this aligned view? And once you get going, I love this Japanese concept of go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
Once you've really set what you need to do, you can go so much faster and the results are so much better.
Yeah.
And so I think, and design really, and we are very much in our organization, design can really be at the center of that, helping to join all of these different areas from R&D and marketing and all those aspects. So we're very positive about AI. We see this as an enabler. It's a tool.
Yeah.
But actually, it's going to free us up and give us some more time to focus even more on delivering better experiences.
Good.
There you go. I think that's the perfect point to stop. Sean, thanks so much. I mean, like I talk about this whole concept of creative community, we really appreciate people like yourself who are incredibly busy, but give up your time to come and share your insights with the people that will be listening and watching the podcast. So really, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for pulling me in, and thank you for doing this. I think it's really important to a community of young designers out there who are quite anxious at the moment as jobs disappear and AI threatens them, that, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Stay true to what you want to do and you believe in.
Yeah.
And we'll get there.
I'm an internal optimist. So I believe there's a great career in design and I think more than ever, we need creatives and creative thinkers. So anybody who's thinking about a creative career or creative education, I think it's an amazing field to operate in. And as you'll see from many of the guests that we've had on our podcast, you can see the incredible journeys they've had throughout the world. So thanks, Sean. And thank you once more. That's a podcast by Lixor Global Design. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for listening to Facets of Design from Lixor Global Design. Please be sure to subscribe, share and follow us on Instagram at Lixor Global Design. Stay tuned for more insightful conversations with innovators shaping the future of the creative industries.